What's up YouTube, and welcome to the Anabolic Outpost, and it is officially pumpkin season. And while I do have a pumpkin pie recipe that's coming, it's going to be uploaded closer to Thanksgiving, and I wanted to hold you guys over with your pumpkin cravings, so in this episode I'm bringing you my pumpkin square. This recipe probably has one of the most ingredients that I've ever seen from any of my recipes that I've made, as you can see on the screen right now. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Like with most of my dessert recipes, the first ingredient that we have is protein powder. And while you could use a typical vanilla or even a pumpkin protein powder if you find it, I've actually found that snickerdoodle protein powder complements the pumpkin flavor really well, and I'm using PE Science protein powder as always. Your artificial sweetener of choice, I am using sucralose. It wouldn't be a pumpkin recipe without canned pumpkin. Doesn't matter the brand, just get whatever you could get. This next one's kind of weird, but garbanzo beans make a great texture inside of the pumpkin squares. A banana, just along with the garbanzo beans, mostly for texture. You're not going to get it that much in the flavor. Fat-free cottage cheese. Any form of powdered peanut butter, I'm using PB Fit. Sugar-free chocolate chips. Egg whites. Walden Farms chocolate syrup. Vanilla extract. Baking powder. And finally, salt. The pumpkin squares are also going to be baked in a 9x9 baking pan, and you are also going to need some cooking spray. Before we get things started, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And also, once you have your chickpeas open, you are going to want to drain them out and then also rinse them out. If somebody could explain to me why you always have to rinse chickpeas out of a can, please let me know, because it doesn't really make sense to me why they won't just come pre-rinsed. One good thing about this recipe though is despite having many ingredients, there are going to be a lot of dishes because all the mixing that needs to be done is going to go down right here in this blender. Or food processor, doesn't really matter either or, as long as I could grind everything up and get the job done. The first thing that you're going to add to the blender is 60 grams of PB2, and also you're going to want to mix the dry ingredients together before you mix everything else. Next thing going in is the sweetener. You're going to need 1.5 grams of the sweetener. If you're using sucralose, that is the measurement. However, if you're using a different sweetener, it's going to be a completely different measurement. You just got to translate it over for yourself and figure it out. For the baking powder, you're going to want 2 grams of that. However, if you're risky like me and just dump it straight out of the container, you might end up having 4 grams of that, but doesn't really matter in the end. And sadly, I mixed all the dry ingredients in there already, so I'm not just going to dig it out, and it ended up turning out just fine, so I wouldn't worry too much if that happens to you. After that, I just added a pinch of salt into there. And now that the dry ingredients are all in there, you're just going to want to mix it up and make sure all the dry ingredients are incorporated within each other. Now for everyone's favorite part, the wet ingredients. First thing I got going in there is the banana. Now, everyone's banana size is going to be different, so it really depends on how big your banana is. Mine was pretty big, so the most accurate measurement is 110 grams, and I just took a little bit off the top, and it ended up being 107, so that's perfectly fine. I'm sure if I inserted the whole banana in there, it would have been fine anyway, but I just wanted the accurate 110 gram measurement. For the pumpkin, it calls for 250 grams of pumpkin, which is unfortunately a little less than half the can. And unfortunately, I have tried freezing the other half of the can, and it doesn't really come out too good in the freezer. If you have any tips for preserving pumpkin, please let me know, because I just have to end up throwing it out at the end. And I think I just broke my scale. Luckily, my scale is salvageable, but my mind isn't, and I ended up forgetting to add the protein powder in with the rest of the dry ingredients. For the protein powder, you're going to want 66 grams of that. Just adding a little sploosh of vanilla extract now, or in normal measurement terms, 5 grams. The rinsed chickpeas are going into the food processor now. Now I do want to make a point. If you look at my scale right now, it says 259 grams. And as you're going to see here now, that the can says 425. That includes the liquid, so their measurement's going to be slightly off every time. If you want to be perfect with it, do the 259 grams. But it's probably going to be only off a few beans every time, so it really makes sense to just end up doing the whole can instead of trying to be perfect with everything. You already know how to take a quick slug of the egg whites for some extra protein before I pour in 60 grams into the food processor. I'm now scooping up 125 grams of the cottage cheese straight out of a fresh carton, and now that only leaves one more ingredient. That one ingredient is the Walden Farms chocolate syrup. If you're wondering if it's going to have any chocolatey flavor to it, which you might be thinking by me adding 60 grams or 60 milliliters of this stuff, it's an awful lot, but it's really just adding another element of sweetness, and you're not going to taste the chocolate flavor at all in the pumpkin squares. The pumpkin flavor, and if you use the snickerdoodle, that is going to be the most dominant flavors in your pumpkin squares. There's only one thing to do now, and that's to watch it all come together. There are a lot of sticky stuff in this recipe, so midway through your blending, you're going to want to scrape the sides to make sure that everything is incorporated nicely. Alright, I just got done blending things up, and this is the consistency you're looking for. A nice, smooth, pumpkin-y consistency, kind of like you would have for pumpkin pie, maybe a little bit thinner, but the key is here to just make sure that everything is blended up and it is smooth throughout. You are now all done with your mixing process, and now you're just going to hit your 9x9 pan with some cooking spray. And then begin to pour the mixture into the pan. You're going to want to use a rubber spatula for this process, as always, to make sure everything that it was blended up gets into the pan and there is no stuff missing on the sides. But don't worry, if there's some still on the sides, you could just scrape it up with your spatula and lick it all up. The batter tastes just as good uncooked as it does cooked, so if you even want to leave a little extra in the blender, don't be afraid, I am not going to say anything. You want to make sure that the batter is completely flat in the pan, and in order to do this, the best way is to just bang it on the counter bench, and it'll eventually just flatten out so it's a nice flat surface layer at the top. I'm sure all this time you were wondering what's going to happen with the chocolate chips, and you gotta just save the best part for last. The best way I've found with the chocolate chips is I have tried to mix them in like a lot of recipes normally do, but honestly I like a little bit of the crunch of the chocolate chip instead of just melting it on the inside. So for me, what I end up doing is just sprinkle it on the top and then continue to bang so that it's just a little bit nestled into the pumpkin square, but it's not completely submerged and it's not all melted, and you still get a little bit of a crunch and added texture at the top in your pumpkin squares. It's officially time to go in the oven now, and this is going to bake for 45 to 55 minutes. Always start on the lower end with 45 and then do the toothpick trick. I will say that with the toothpick trick, it isn't always as accurate with this recipe because you don't want it fully hard and cooked through like you would for something like cookies. You want it a little soft, like a little bit of that pumpkin pie texture, if you know what I'm saying. And here we go, this is the final product. Do not be alarmed if yours looks really puffy once it comes out of the oven, because once it cools, it ends up flattening a little bit, and it's probably as much as half what it comes out when it's right out the oven, rather than once you put it in the fridge and cool overnight. And just like pumpkin pie or really any other recipe with pumpkin, it's best consumed once it's in the fridge for at least 4 hours and it's really cooled down. I've tried it hot right out the oven. Like you would with normal baked goods, you kind of want it hot out of the oven, but this just doesn't have the same flavor with the pumpkin in there, and you want it to sit and cool and actually be cold when you eat it. That is definitely the best way to eat it in my opinion. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to my subscriber MK for suggesting that I give the calorie and macro breakdown in my recipes. So here it is for the pumpkin squares. For the entire pan, it's going to be a little bit different depending on how you divide it up, but for the entire pan, it's going to be 1,500 calories, 30 grams of fat, 180 grams of carbs, 40 grams of fiber, and 128 grams of protein. That's pretty good macros. If you wanted to eat it all in one day, you could, and you could be still on track with your diet, which is great. What I love about the Anabolic kitchen, and what I love about cooking low calorie in general, you can eat as much as you want with little to no consequences. And that is all I have for you guys for this video. Thank you for all this support. I just recently started this channel. I'm only 4 videos in, and I did not expect to already hit the 50 subscriber mark. It really does not mean like anything to most people, but considering I only have 4 videos out with 50 subscribers and just a little over 1,000 views, that is a pretty high subscribe rate, so that really tells me that I'm doing something right. If you do see that I'm doing something wrong though, please be sure to comment, just like my subscriber MK commented on the macro breakdown, and I will be doing that in all future videos from here on out. So thank you for that suggestion. I do take any and all suggestions, especially recipe suggestions. Just drop them down below, and I would love to interact with my subscribers in the community more. Other than that, if you found this tutorial helpful today, be sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.